Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. And in today's video, I just kind of wanted to talk about where I think we are socially and just kind of like the things that I feel like women are bringing to light with women's platforms and women actually being in a space where they actually have a voice. And so, y'all know how I do. I really think the purpose of this YouTube channel, for me at least, is to be able to practice communicating in a way that's more thorough, slowing down my speech, fostering my new vocabulary, and overall just really practicing public speaking skills as well as teaching. So bear with me. I know I don't typically get on here and do like outlines. I don't typically get on here and like make my YouTube channel more than anything other than that. Definitely just reading things, sharing my observances, and kind of like trying to streamline my thoughts. So the premise of today's video, however, will be mostly about men and women and just kind of how we're going to just be talking about patriarchy and oppression generally. So where do I want to start? I took a shower and then I had so many thoughts. So I'm really hoping that this comes together perfectly. One, I'm going to say that I think the biggest disadvantage that society does for young men is that it really discourages things like education. We can look at this from a lot of different angles. We'll take industrialization, for example, but we can also look at the stereotype and how men are socialized to be more physical. And you could say that that's well-meaning and all of those things, and that's great. But I do think that this plays a huge role in their inability to actually have relational skills with women, and so this could then go into class, all right, classism and certain socioeconomic backgrounds and factors and things like that, which we know where there is a equality in education and income. Generally, those relationships are a little bit more equal, and people are not experiencing really harsh power dynamics, which I think are the byproduct of men being in a society where they're told that they have power, and men are realizing that they may be a little powerless, right? You start talking about men who don't have those, cushiony jobs, men who don't have education, right? Men who don't have all the women at their disposal, right? Like, you start talking about those things that patriarchy promises, right? That America promises to young men and men in general. And men who don't achieve that are deeply grieved. And they go about expressing these grievances. And they take them out on the ones that are easy to oppress, right? Women and children. And so when I start thinking about that and I start thinking about how those grievances are made manifest, I think that this is really due to a lack of education, right? What happens when the thing that you are taught that you are entitled to, and the thing that you were taught that is easily achievable and attainable, is not attainable to you, right? You grow up in a world and you are kind of like lost. You don't understand why you're not, achieving and getting these things that it is that you feel like are owed to you, right? So you have that sense of entitlement just from being a man, right? I think within the lives of most men, there have been instances, I'm sure, where many men can really attest to this, which they probably won't, but they can attest to the fact that there have been experiences in their lives where they have taken advantage of women. They have oppressed and abused someone, and that little ounce of power that they've gotten from that, the lack of accountability, the absolute of no consequences, was a bit of a rush. And the thing about a conscience and conviction, right, is that the longer you do something, the less of impact you'll have, right? It gets easier. So you no longer have that first sense of guilt and those human emotions, right? Those things that are very much there, right? You talk about emotion from a psychological standpoint, but even just spiritually, right? You no longer have those things that kind of tell you, hey, that was wrong. Don't do that again, right? After a while, you start to kind of numb that out. And when I start thinking about incels and insecure men, I believe this is why most men are insecure, quite frankly. It's really hard to be a person who loves themselves and is esteemed within themselves, and you lack integrity, right? If you're someone who's always doing bad things, you're aware of it, right? I think we're all pretty much aware of right and wrong. Typically, abusers and people who victimize people are ones who are stuck within victimization because the psychology behind that and within that is you believe that you have been victimized so bad that you are the only person who has ever been victimized. Nobody can relate to this pain. It is unbearable, right? Other people are more privileged than you are. So you must go out and make someone pay, right? Or you must go out and project this pain onto someone else, or give this cross rather, right, to somebody else, because you just can't possibly fathom, the reality that you're not the only person who's experienced pain, and you feel pretty weak, I think, a lot of times within yourself when you start to realize that you're not the only person who's had this pain, and there are other people, i.e. women specifically, who have endured far worse things, and they're handling it a lot better than you. So then you have that, and it's really because you've never been taught how to handle things. When I think about the way young boys are socialized, and I just got this new book, it's called Raising Men. I'm not reading it tonight. I'm reading Business and Economics. We will be learning about neoliberalism. I think I'm saying that right. So I just look forward to learning about that tonight specifically. But I do look forward to reading that book. And when I just in my own personal observations, however, when I think about the ways in which men are socialized, young boys specifically, nobody really teaches men. Right? Nobody really raises them. There is no one who actually sits with men and young boys and have a conversation about life, and most people aren't raised. I used to think my father was really annoying, quite frankly. He used to talk so much. My grandfather was the same way. And they weren't necessarily philosophical, but they didn't have a problem expressing their thoughts and their views and their perspectives about the world and, all these different things. And it used to bore the heck out of me, quite frankly. But I realized that is a very key component in raising your children. We're going to take a water break. And so what I realized is that people don't raise their kids. And The Atlantic put out an article a long time ago. Y'all know I love The Atlantic, like huge stan. But The Atlantic put out an article not too long ago, and it just talked about how we all need to take like a parenting course because we actually don't know what we're doing when you talk about raising kids, right? Like, we have no idea the basics and the fundamentals that really go into creating a human being. And I think this is largely due to mothering just being something that is entirely devalued, right? You have a lot of women who are kind of at this space right now, I think, with our obstruction or desire to obstruct patriarchy, on top of just a lot of abuse that is really taking place, that is being normalized. And I don't even think it's normalized. I think it's abuse against women has always been socially acceptable, but we just now have a platform to really shine a light on it. And then I also give a little bit of credit to the algorithm because hey, it kind of has a way of fostering and feeding things to you, the things that you engage with. But because mothering is so devalued in our society, I just think that, we don't really take into account like the significance of having a child, right? And if we do take into account its significance, it's more so in a negative way. And if you don't know this by now, America and the way we're socialized just generally, especially today, right? I think somewhere along the lines, negativity became a little bit more prominent. It became the thing that we desired more than anything. We actually no longer believe in, good things, beautiful things, right? But I also think that's capitalism. Like, I think money, greed, it ruins all things. So you get older and the things that are or should be enjoyable about your life and just the human experience are no longer enjoyable. It's terrible. And sharing your negative experiences about a thing can actually garner you sympathy. And so there's another layer there. But back to what I was saying about boys and them not being raised and us not actually speaking to our children and talking to them about things. Yeah. we're gonna get people who are gonna grow older who have absolutely no fundamentals in terms of like self-regulation or even self-concept, right? It's really mind-blowing. I mean, I couldn't even imagine the lost sense of identity within so many young boys and who eventually grow up to become men, right? I couldn't imagine that. I mean, we really sit and think about the magnitude of this, right? You have a lot of young men who have absolutely no self-concept. It's unfortunate because I think we start talking about the abuse. It's like your mother was the only person who was there. Women a lot of times are the only person who is there. Men have a very interesting way of avoiding one another, and they have a very interesting way of really turning a blind eye to the abuse that is committed against women. And I think in large, this is really just due to the fact that most men are actually pretty abusive. And it's really hard to call out something that you condone, or to demean, or I don't want to say demean, but to really like I'll just say shine a light on, right? Like to shine a light on it and to defend women when you are a perpetuator of that same behavior. It's interesting. I think men can be pretty hypocritical. Most people can be pretty hypocritical. Well, I'll say this. We can all be hypocritical, or maybe we've been hypocritical, but I think that's the one area that I don't really see men kind of breaching in that area. And, even if they are someone who could be, well, no, take that back. I take that back, because this reminds me of the relationship coaches that are men who were later found out for cheating on their wives and so forth. Which brings me to my next point. We're going to talk a little bit about religion, and we're going to talk about the work of deconstruction. I personally don't think this work has ever been done successfully. I know for myself, I have not found the right language to be able to really critique this work in a very effective way, right? We know that religion serves as a haven, right? Especially for the Black church. It is a pillar in society where you can really go, and it's not exclusionary, right? Well, that actually would be a lie. But in general, for the Black body, we'll just, we're not talking about people of different sexual orientation. We're not talking about that. And well, there's a lot of things that actually are pretty exclusionary with the church, but just for generally, I don't even think that can even describe it, because I actually do think that it is pretty exclusionary. But what it should be, we'll say that, is a haven for Black people. And I think for those who are still within its community, it does serve as a haven for them, because it does kind of shield Black people from the exclusionary practices that is American society. I think that's a better way to put it. It's the place where you can go if you're poor, right? It's the poor, it's the lame, it's the, and so it should be that. It should be that. But again, it's not. And I think it's always kind of been that way. It's always been a little corrupt. And I think that this is really what happens when you give people too much authority. I mean, to have a preacher, I'm going to take a water break, but let's really think about this. Like, having a preacher, someone who is supposedly hearing from God in a more louder, audible, we'll say, fashion, that's a lot of authority to give a person, right? And it's like, when you take God, right, the all-knowing, very powerful, right, haven, refuge, right, and you put that in the hands of like a man, right, because there was a point in time where there actually couldn't be women preachers, right? It's pretty dangerous. That's actually pretty dangerous, right? And you couple that with the lack of education, because we know religion has always been anti-secularism, okay? Anti-worldly, right? So you have a lot of people who have very little knowledge with this very, very powerful position, and we don't really consider that magnitude. And so what I'm realizing within religious communities as well, I had a pastor that I listened to for years, and I think, even not to really critique this pastor's work per se, that's not what I'm trying to do, but like kind of, I started to realize how this person really kind of got something out of talking to women in a way that made women feel very incompetent in their relational dynamics with men. And I remember a long time ago, somewhere along the lines, from listening to Christian relationship coaches and Christian pastors and so forth, I just remember thinking to myself, why don't they make more videos about men, right? Then why don't they make more videos to men, right? Talking to men about how to be in relationships, how to conduct themselves, how to actually, go out in the world and be productive, and how to overcome systemic issues, and how to rise, and how to become kings, and all these different things, right? There were, quite frankly, no programs for this, but there were always a plethora, and there are numerous amount of programs for Black women, and women specifically. That blew my mind. And when you listen to a lot of the messages that are, circulating within church culture and within religion, it's always like women need to be this, right? You got the harlot, you got the whore, you got all these different things. And it's no wonder why being in a religious environment as a woman, you're oftentimes isolated. You're oftentimes, exploited, because with these very harmful messages, these very degrading narratives about women, and the Bible and its interpretation, knowing that when we say man, it should be something that should be a bit inflexible, because we know that it's talking about all people, right? A lot of times when you're having conversations about like Proverbs, and you're having conversations about the contentious wife and all these different things, those things are typically not interchangeable. So men, a lot of times in these communities, are free reign, and quite frankly, it's a little dangerous. So this is just a message for the women who like listen to the Kingdom Spouse videos and so forth. It's like, you really want to take a step back, right? Because it can be very dangerous going in religious communities as a woman. You have to be very, very aware. Okay, wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove, right? Because these communities can be very toxic. And what's also something I've noticed is, because we haven't found the right language to deconstruct and to really educate people and bring about a sense of awareness to the harmful behaviors and the narratives and the sermons, right? Within religious communities, a lot of people will actually attack you for trying to shine a light on the spiritual abuse. There's not a lot of research out there about it, surprisingly. There are a few books. I've tried to find some things from ChatGPT, but nothing really much. A lot of the books that I found, I weren't able to find. I didn't know if that was just something that was past tense or what, but I wasn't able to actually purchase some of the books. But yeah, not a lot of light there. I think we are aware of, a certain type of abuse, but we're not really cognizant of the magnitude of it and its implications, especially when it comes to women. I think that there, in-depth research is certainly needed, because it's 100%. You always have sermons about Proverbs 31, but you never hear anything about Ephesians 5. There's so many. It's really a culture that really does prey on women, and a lot of times, and it preys for men. Men are typically excused from everything, right? You have a lot of men, and there is no expectancy for them to live their lives a certain type of way, versus women. Women face extreme scrutiny for living their lives a certain type of way and professing to be godly. So it's a very saddening dynamic when you start to realize it. And I think it should be every due diligence for every pastor to take into account of that. But again, when you have a lack of knowledge on top of, it can make it very challenging for people to acknowledge those disparities. So my point that I was making about this pastor and so many Christian coaches who mentor to women and who are, i.e. spiritual leaders over women, is I think a lot of times they garner a sense of power. They garner a sense of power from, telling women, oh, and it's in the language, right? It's in the language, it's in the undertones, right? It's things like, women don't understand this about men. This is what y'all don't understand about men, and it's all of that. And then you always have this thing about the bad boy, which men love to profess. And quite frankly, I remember I made a podcast video like years ago. It was a podcast audio, not a video. And I just talked about the myth of the bad boy. And I started to question how this was really rooted in anti-Blackness, because it always targeted a handsome Black male or a stylish Black male, and I was like, what about them makes them a bad boy? And it was always really based on appearances. And I found that people who, I don't know, I don't want to get too far into this because I don't want it to be taken out of context, but I do want to bring awareness to the fact that something that is so very evident to me is that I don't know what it is, but society has always had a way of critiquing good looking people and placing them in categories as like, malicious, or, people who, I don't want to say good looking, I'll say attractive people, and specifically men. But again, I don't want to lose sight of the video, but I just wanted to kind of pause there because I always find that to be very interesting. And a lot of times they say this with the assumption or assuredness that if you date someone who is presenting more meek, someone who is less attractive, someone who is a social outcast, or let me not go too far, then you'll have a better chance of success and faithfulness. And it's not true. And it's really unfortunate because I think it sets a lot of people up to be discriminated against, but you don't really call it discriminatory practices because it's like you're attractive or, socially attractive or whatever. So I just thought that was very interesting. But yeah, and I think a lot of times it's a way for men to kind of somewhat get back at the men who maybe were more physically attractive or whatever the case may be, so that they can, kind of get women for themselves. I don't know. But undertones, I do think that even within religious communities, it can be a bit dangerous. And I do think that they get something from, telling women they don't know what they're talking about, telling women they don't know how to discern men, and all these different things. And just listening to the videos, I do think that they actually get something from that. You have to understand, you talk about like attention, you talk about men getting older, and, even men in the church, what is their motivations for helping women? And going into an all women's ministry, and it's not to say that they can't. I'm not here to twist or to, cause a bit of division. No, I don't know, but it does make you question, right? You talk about, being ex-players and all these different things, and now you're changed. And hey, listen, again, people can change. I'm not saying that, but it does make you question, especially when you start listening to these messages and the insensitivity of their language when it comes to dealing with women, right? See, you all in the bed with such and such and such and such. You listen to these sermons and it's like, what is your motivation for presenting yourself as like this mentor to women as a man, right? As a married man specifically, right? Is it that you want to help women get in relationships, or like, what is it that you're looking to do here? And I think the truth is that I think a lot of these men find a sense of relief and pleasure in actually critiquing and attacking women. And, and something I'll say too to this is I think it's always so important to be growing and learning. Because I don't think that everybody is doing something intentionally. I don't think that these men do this to intentionally inflict harm on women and in the lives of women. I do think that a lot of times, like when it comes to the content that they create and the ministries that they start and the businesses that they start, I do think maybe, I think maybe in part they really were looking to help women. But it still makes me beg the question, why aren't more male pastors, male relational coaches, why aren't they speaking and working with men? Right? Like, why? And I do believe, this goes back to my entire premise of this video, is men are oftentimes inadequate and they're coming up short in a lot of areas because there's no resources for them. There's no resources for them. And it's like women are the ones who engage and participate and actively save them, and it's really saddening, how many males do you know actually go out in their communities and do things, how many male pastors do you know actually actively participate in educating men on how to be husbands and how to be? None. And why is that? Right? Why is that? I think, for one, we could presume that they know something about the male brain. They know that men aren't going to listen. They know that this is a waste of time. But yet, women are generally expected to constantly be in partnership with men, constantly be fighting for relationships and all these different things, right? Like, why is that? Like, this is. I'm not making any. I'm not stating any facts at this last segment here. We're just going to really talk about what could be some of the reasons why men are so very evidently, so apparently anti-men in their work and their ministry, right? And the things that they do. Why don't they talk to other men? Why don't they teach other men, right? The other assumption could be self-hate. You know, it's the same reason why you'll have some women who are neglectful towards other women, who are abusive towards other women. Self-hate. You know, it's hard to show up and be there for someone if you hate yourself and they remind you of yourself, you know? And thirdly, because there's no money in it. You know, women have been sold for ages, okay? Since there was the first magazine, okay? On medical prescriptions, on all different kinds of things, even today, right? It's so easy to sell women on something, right? We're talking now about anorexia. You know, you have women who were born a different type of way, like, and they're desiring to be skinny. You have women who are celebrities and they're like the hall marker for thinness, and it's not anything that is genetic, you know, and it's very unhealthy. But so it's like women have always been sold ideals about how to be, right? And if you tell a woman that you are the reason why you don't have love, right, then it's very easy for you to go into anybody's ministry and hand over $400, $500, anything in coaching, right? You'll easily hand that over, right? You don't realize you're not getting any results. You know, you're not getting any results. And most importantly, I think if you can sell women on the idea that they're incompetent, right, and that they can't make decisions for themselves, and that they are too emotional to really have any sense of self-governance over their own lives, then you can definitely, you know. And so it's really saddening. I do question, when will it ever end, you know, making a mockery of women. I think men are oftentimes vastly misled about women and female anatomy, right? Like when you think about it, women have intuition. I do believe it's truly God's gift. You know, we don't have the physical strength, but God put something on the inside of us to be able to discern when things aren't right. And it's honestly a superpower. But because it is the one thing that men don't have, and it can't be studied, women's intuitive knowledge and intuitive knowing, right? Intuitive wisdom, rather. Let's seriously, intuitive power, okay, is something that is undermined. You know, it is something that is undermined. And so men think that we're helpless, but women know that that intuitive power is extremely strong and it's incredibly beautiful, you know? So there's a lack of understanding there. You know, I don't think men even understand how powerful women are, how intuitive women are, how beautiful women are. Like, you have no idea. There's really no understanding of like internal worth and internal beauty. I don't think that men have a concept of that, you know. And how can you? I mean, you can look at it from a lot of different factors. You know, it's a lot of different reasons why men are behind, and I don't think that men do men any help in getting ahead, but women are always expected to, and women are tired. And so I'll go ahead and end this video now. I think that this is pretty much the end of the video. I hope you guys got something out of this video. I don't think we did too bad. Good night.